to be able to work with her. We have brought on a director of social work director, and has created a program, and she's taken on a lot of initiatives. And one of my favorite things she does is once a week, every Monday, actually, peer meetings where we have just a confidential space to be able to talk about things, whether it be at work or what's going on in the world, and just have her in the room to be able to talk through things. And I think just making that space and holding that important hour every week has just been really, really helpful. But I love your ideas. Those are great, Shannon. So really helpful.
Thank you. And that's a great program and benefit that your organization is able to offer. So I applaud them for that. That's wonderful. And welcome everyone. I believe Allison has just shared the question of the day. We've started discussing that. Feel free to unmute yourself and share what some of the ideas are at your organization, or you can also share them in the chat. We're also sharing Halloween costume ideas for pets if you'd like to share something fun as well. I see another organization has a social worker that's helping. I think that's such a great idea for organizations to have, just aside from the crazy things going on in the world that are impacting people and pets, just to help with the everyday stresses of our jobs. A social worker can be a great benefit as well as to the community. Well, Claire, if you would like to start national updates, we can do that. And folks, please continue sharing your thoughts on the question of the day or pet costumes.
Thanks, Shannon. Happy Monday. Happy to see everyone here. I know a few more people are jumping on. We're going to open it up to national updates. I know Allison's going to put it in the chat, but I wanted to do a plug for Journey You Own. There's a session on November 1st. You can register online. There's going to be a link in the chat. 10 a.m. Pacific time. This is a series that's been going on for a while, webcast series. In this session in November 1st is going to be around practices for well-being and productivity. And the focus will be values and alignment. So Jyoti Robertson's been incredible. So definitely jump into those, and the registration link's going to be in the chat. So happy to open it up now to national updates if anyone wants to unmute or put a link in the chat. We'll start that now.
Hi, Claire. I'll start. Hi, everybody. My name is Jose Ocaño. I'm the founder and CEO of Hatching, where we help people with the mindset and skills to live better and work better. And this Wednesday, also, if anyone hasn't gone to Jyoti's mindfulness training, they're so great. I hope to also see you there at 10 a.m. Also on Wednesday at 1 p.m., we are hosting another Hatching Hour, our third one. And I'm going to be interviewing Sarah Shire. She is best-selling author of this book, A Case for Compassion. We're going to be talking about compassion in the workplace. How do you create a culture of compassion? How, as leaders, do we use the power and influence that we have to influence or create the systems that actually help us be compassionate at work? And as individuals, what do we do to really maintain our sense of compassion and our wholeness at work? So I'll drop the registration in the chat. Feel free, if you can't make it, to still register, so that way you can get a recording of the call if you're interested. But we would love to see y'all there.
Hi, everybody. Stacy with the Community Cats podcast. It's been a while since I've been to one of these calls, and it's great to see everybody here. And so I just wanted to mention, we have our TNR certification workshop, which is this November 4th on Saturday, which is approved for NACA. If there are any animal control officer trainings, approved for continuing education credits for NACA. So it's from 2 to 4:45 p.m. on Saturday, November 4th. TNR certification workshop with neighborhood cats. We usually get an update at the end about what's going on with the community cats in Maui post-fire. Brian Cordes and team have been heading up the community cat situation there. So we usually do get a quick update, a sort of status update at the end of the session. And then on November 11th, we have a free webinar, Colony Caretaking Tips and Tricks. Our merch shop has lots of TNR Pride swag for the holidays, as well as gift cards. So just doing a little plug on our holiday shop. And, if folks need any assistance or help with regards to community cat issues, access to care, spay, neuter, I'm really heavily into that at this point in time. So if people are looking to grow and build their capacity, we've got a lot of resources for that. And when I say capacity, TNR, volunteering, spay, neuter, starting a MASH clinic on a Sunday or something like that. At this point in time, my campaign is see it, solve it. And so let's work to try and create some solutions to help assist the animals in our community. So I'm here to help brainstorm and help the crowd. So I'll put a link in the chat. Thanks.
Hey everybody, it's Kathy from Canada. Just to let you know that we're currently having a flash sale for our Canadian Violence Link conference, which is next week, November 8th and 9th. And so you can register now up to November 3rd for 25% off. And remember, that's Canadian dollars for you all here in the US. That means it'll be way less, way less. So looking forward to hopefully seeing a number of you virtually online at that event coming up next week.
Hi, I'm Kelly Dewar, Senior Community Solutions Specialist for Maddie's Fund. We are having Camp Maddie. It will be December 7th. It is a new learning series that is going to be a virtual half day about foster. But we wanted to show you this quick sneak peek from two of our speakers, Shania and Abigail. Allison will cue it up.
Hi everybody, it's Shania. I'm our behavior manager over at Operation Kindness.
And I'm the intake and foster manager, Abby, also at Operation Kindness.
And we're so excited to talk to y'all about our collaboration between our behavior and foster programs and the way that we've helped to market, increase foster placement, and foster to adoption.
Our amazing teams have worked together with great ideas to make sure these guys get placed. We're excited to help other shelters and other teams make that collaboration and find placement for their foster dogs with behavioral support.
So we are so excited to see y'all there. Make sure to join us.
Thank you, Kelly. That's great. I love that video. Does anyone else have any national updates?
Hi, I'm Lindsay O'Gan. I'm the instructional design manager over at Austin Pets Alive. And we've got a really exciting thing that we have just started this year called the Training and Education Center. And it's all about frontline employee training, and it's very like base level staff who have no experience working with animals or working in the shelter world. It's all the frontline training needs of cleaning a cage and giving injections and all of that kind of frontline staff training. And so the website, I'm going to drop it in the chat, but we've got several courses already made, introductions to shelter, veterinary medicine, animal care courses. And so we're creating new courses every day, and we're really excited to share those out with you guys. So if you would like more information, you can check out the website. I just put it in the chat.
Hi, this is Jennifer Comas from the Humane Society of the United States. Just reminding everyone that Animal Care Expo 2024 registration is open. We invite you to register early to gain the discounts that we offer there. Expo is going to be May 15th through the 18th this year in San Antonio. We also have a variety of holiday contests that will be leading up to Expo this year that will involve some free registrations and some discounts. So please keep your eyes peeled for those on our social media, and I'll put those links in the chat as well.
Thank you everyone for those wonderful updates and sharing opportunities with everyone. My name is Shannon Roebuck. I'd like to welcome you all to Maddie's weekly community conversation. And I'm co-hosting today with the wonderful Claire Callison, Director of National Operations at Austin Pets Alive. And I'm so pleased to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Brandale Mills Cox, founder and principal at Inclusive Marketing Research Group, and she will be discussing community insights for pet fostering.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here. Give me a moment to allow me to share my screen and we will dive in. All right. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Community Insights for Pet Foster Care research project that was completed. We started it last January and completed it last May. And so I'll walk through the process that I did in working in conjunction with Sharon, Kelly, and Sheila, and just kind of the approach to this project. And so essentially the goal was to gather insights from BIPOC individuals, and BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous People of Color, to help understand their perspectives about pet fostering, determining what their motivations and potential barriers might be to be engaged as fosters, and then to use those insights to help create targeted strategies to engage more participation for communities of color. So a little background about me, which will help provide a little bit of insight in this discussion and my approach to this research. I'm founder and principal of Inclusive Market Research Group. And although I am a research specialist in general, my specific expertise is in Black communities and communities of color, and using those insights to really help tell an authentic experience based on their lived and shared experiences. And so that's the approach and perspective that I brought to this project. And it was a lot of fun. I really engaged and loved engaging the participants in this study. And so with that, we conducted 2 phases of the study. The first study, the first stage was a survey where we interviewed or disseminated a survey to about 744 respondents across the United States. We wanted an equal representation throughout the United States across those groups that I mentioned, Black, Indigenous People of Color, and across all different ages, to really kind of be able to get a good sense and understanding about what people's awareness of pet fostering is, their sentiments, their perception, what they think some of the requirements are to engage in pet fostering. And again, the goal was to really kind of use these insights to help engage more effectively and create a better recruitment and retention strategy there. And so the first phase of the project, as I mentioned, was the survey. It was a 48-question survey covering those demographics that I mentioned. All respondents were 18 years and older, but we did have a lot of respondents that identified as Gen Zers, millennials, et cetera. So we had a great representation across all generations in this survey group. And so the survey topics covered, first, pet fostering knowledge. So the survey questions really evaluated whether or not the respondents had an existing understanding of pet fostering process, how they defined pet fostering, what they considered pet fostering to be. And then from there, we helped determine kind of what would be some potential motivators to get communities of color to be engaged in the pet fostering process. In addition to that, we wanted to identify any barriers that would stand in the way from getting people involved in the pet fostering process. And so with that, the kind of overview summary of the knowledge portion of the survey is that the majority of respondents had never fostered any pets before, but they exhibited an interest in fostering. And what we saw, and you'll see this same theme across the other 2 sections, is that those younger generations, so Gen Zers and millennials, they really had a high interest in fostering. And they also had a high experience in fostering, with many of them having done so within the past year. And so as you'll see, this is definitely something that I recommended be an area of focus in terms of outreach. It seems that these younger individuals have the desire, the passion, the opportunity to be engaged as pet fosters. And so there's absolutely a space to kind of get them connected in the process. Generally, most of the respondents had fostered in order to help the pet homelessness problem in their community. And as mentioned, those younger generations learned about the process through social media, while the older generations, no surprise, relied more on their healthcare, animal welfare organizations within their community. So as I mentioned, a huge opportunity to engage and share more resources for those younger generations. Now moving on to the pet fostering motivation summaries. So respondents who had never fostered seemed more inclined to want to foster in order to help a friend or family member. Those Gen Zers were more interested in the fostering to adoption, so the more long-term options, whereas the older generations we saw, they were more interested in the short-term options in the pet fostering process. Now, in evaluating statements from people sharing their pet foster experiences, most respondents were motivated by testimonies that assisted at helping a loved one. And so a large section of the survey had just kind of quick anecdotes and asked the respondents to determine how much that anecdote influenced their desire to want to foster. And so many of them were moved by the ones where they were mentioning helping a community member or helping a family member and providing that temporary safe space for those animals. All right, and moving on to the barriers summary. Now, of course, our focus or our survey was self-identified animal lovers. And so naturally, many of them had already had pets. And so we identified that as a barrier. Many said, well, I have pets and they might not necessarily get along with a new pet coming into the home. And so that's absolutely a barrier. But as we'll talk about in the focus groups, many of those current pet owners still felt like they had space and had opportunity to welcome a new pet in their home temporarily. Additionally, those who have never fostered but expressed some interest in fostered said that they would be more likely to foster if the process was easy and if they had more information and support. And we'll get a chance to talk about what that support looks like a little bit in those focus group discussions that we had. And again, this really just kind of highlights the opportunity to not only provide that support, but to create general awareness about the pet fostering process and what is required in that process. In addition to that, the findings also indicated that the silent generation, so the more older generation, were least likely to foster. Additional barriers included housing concerns. So many mentioned they just didn't feel like they had enough space in their home to bring in a pet or an additional pet, which obviously creates a barrier to want to become a foster. All right, so high-level overview of the summary of findings. So as I mentioned, this really created or presented an opportunity to engage younger prospects, to re-engage previous fosters. So we saw a lot of people who mentioned that they had fostered in the past, also saying that they would be open to fostering in the future. And a lot of these individuals also learned about fostering through shared experiences, which we'll dive a little bit deeper in the focus group overview. And so again, great opportunity to engage the Gen Zers and the millennials, so those 18 to 41, engaging those previous fosters, and then just increasing overall awareness. And so leveraging all type of media, whether it be social media, the more traditional media to reach those more older generations, to really just, again, increase awareness and share information about the pet fostering process. And so the second phase of the research project was our focus groups. And so how we developed the focus group discussion guide was really based on the findings that we took away from in that survey. So we wanted to kind of test some of those themes that I just mentioned and really kind of see what resonates with audience members and really kind of build on that quantitative data that we collected. And so within the focus groups, we had 5 focus groups, which included a total of 48 individuals, and they ranged from the ages of 24 to 67. Again, located all throughout the United States with various income and education levels. And in those focus group discussions, you'll see that the respondents also provided suggestions on ways that you can better engage BIPOC pet fosters. And so I started each focus group with the open-ended question to all of the participants, and I prompted them to finish the statement, pets are. And so as you see, overwhelmingly, the majority of the, or many of the respondents, I'll say, consider their pets to be family, or consider the pets that they grew up with to be family. And so I think that's important to note that oftentimes there are assumptions made about communities of color and their pets and how they consider their pets, and even if they like pets at all. And I think that overwhelmingly these conversations revealed that you know, communities of color, BIPOC communities, are no different from other communities when it comes to how they love and care for their pets, right? They are a part of the family. Many of them, most of them said that they like animals more than they like people. And so it really just kind of speaks to the love and care that they have for animals and what it means to their lives. So the 5 overarching themes that I kind of drew from each of the focus group discussions, first being that the definition of pet fostering varied. So many of the respondents had a general understanding of, you know, how pet fostering is defined and what that looks like, but most of them did not even consider short-term options as a type of pet fostering. So when presented with the option of fostering for a weekend or fostering for a night, they hadn't even considered that because in their mind, they assumed that pet fostering was a little bit more long-term. In addition to that, a lot of people were fosters but didn't even realize it. So for example, a lot of respondents, or many respondents, talked about caring for a pet for a family member who maybe went away for an extended amount of time and didn't necessarily realize that that is an example of pet fostering, right? So to them, it was just, hey, I'm just taking care of my uncle's dog while he's wherever. But, you know, by definition, that is pet fostering. In addition to that, the second theme, word of mouth being a pathway to discover pet fostering. So for those respondents who were aware of pet fostering and the process, many of them talk about learning about it through family members or community members, and really just kind of that shared experience and shared narratives of what pet fostering is and what those individuals' experiences look like. In addition to that, learning from the vet or animal welfare organizations. So here we see the importance of these community staples kind of being a place to share and disseminate information and increase that awareness. The third theme, so the idea of the perfect prospect. So the ideal foster caregiver was not necessarily expected to be a pet expert, but instead someone who possessed a genuine passion for animals and had the necessary time. So overwhelmingly, we talked about, or we heard respondents say that if people were interested or were planned on moving forward in the pet fostering process, that they needed to be passionate about pets, they needed to love them, they needed to have the time to dedicate to caring for these pets, the space dedicated, the resources, etc., which is a great segue to the fourth point, which is incentives motivate, housing presents an option. So many of the participants talked about how they would be a little bit more interested in engaging as a pet foster if they had incentives. And those incentives might look like maybe providing food for the pet or financial support to ensure that the pet got its vaccines, et cetera. So any type of incentives to really kind of motivate an individual to be a little bit more inclined to welcome a new pet in their home. As I mentioned before, those barriers that we identified in the survey were certainly echoed in the focus group discussions in terms of, you know, not having enough space in their home and currently owning pets. And then a lot of respondents talked about fearing that they'd get too attached, right? And so in pet fostering, you know, you go into it assuming that it's a temporary situation. And many of them just said that, you know, what if I just get too attached and I don't want to separate from the dog, which is an awesome sentiment when having these conversations. In addition to that, as we'll talk about, we walk through an activity to help them provide recommendations, very specific recommendations on the best ways to kind of promote and advertise pet fostering. And many of the respondents talked about how you have to engage people in a way that is authentic, that really kind of speaks to the experiences and the joy that comes from being a pet foster, but it needs to be real, right? And so they said that if a celebrity were the face of a campaign, for example, it needs to be a celebrity that everyone knows has a passion for pets or animals, and has the connection with that community, because people aren't interested in just, you know, a face or a facade of this work. They want somebody who they feel like they can really genuinely connect with in terms of their love and passion for pets. And so additional ways that they mentioned were, of course, leveraging news, social media platforms, etc. All right, and here are just a few quotes about, you know, pet fostering exposure, how these individuals learned about pet fostering. As you see, it kind of varies. One person here, we see Nicholas on the right, said that he learned about pet fostering just from randomly running into somebody in the park. They kind of talked about it. And, you know, from there, he was engaged in as a pet foster. Again, many of these experiences are just shared via word of mouth, shared from community member to community member or family members. And so a lot of them kind of relied on that word of mouth or that community connection to learn about pet fostering and the options as it relates to pet fostering. All right, so as I mentioned, the focus groups were an extension of the survey data that we collected. And so based on those themes that I described from the survey data, I really kind of wanted to flesh them out in these discussions. And so these were the specific points that I ensured to ask about whether or not it resonated with them, what they thought the perception was of them. So for example, enhanced animal welfare support boots pet fostering. So respondents supported preliminary findings that animal welfare assistance would increase the likelihood to fostering. So again, it's those incentives that I mentioned that would really increase that likelihood. Factors that are impacting likelihood to foster. So receiving information online about fostering opportunities, and from previous fosters would increase that likelihood to foster. Again, that pet fostering definition was a bit unclear. So like survey respondents, focus group participants had a varying understanding of what they understood pet fostering to be. The motivations and barriers were very similar in those focus group discussions, so certainly aligned with what we found in that survey data. And again, in those focus group discussions, we saw that those younger generations, the millennials and Gen Zers, were really interested and engaged in wanting to learn more information about pet fostering and really becoming pet fosters themselves. Another exercise that we walk through in these discussions is the prompt, how might we? And so I asked respondents to channel their favorite thought leader and provide insights on how we might better engage BIPOC communities with the pet fostering process and get them informed and get them more involved as pet fosters. And as they kind of shared their perspectives, two overarching themes kind of came from all 5 focus groups. And the first being that organizations need to be in the community to share these opportunities. And so many people talked about providing information or being visible in community spaces like gyms, barbershops, etc. And also supporting BIPOC-owned businesses and creating some type of alignment there. And again, sharing information in those spaces. In addition to that, creating community events where you are sharing information about pet fosters. We often see, pet adoption agencies kind of set up in community events similarly. And so there's an opportunity to kind of leverage that existing system, and again, create more awareness and general engagement around the pet fostering process. The second scenario is, or the second activity rather, that we created in opposed to the focus groups was a hypothetical community event. The various prompts rather, first being the hypothetical community event where a local animal welfare organization is posed to increasing awareness about the pet fostering and various opportunities. And so within each of these prompts that you see on the screen, I kind of probed in a little bit deeper. I asked, what about these scenarios would be the most effective? What would have the greater impact? What would be the best approach in these two scenarios? And the first being leveraging social media. So social media was a key theme for a lot of those younger participants in these conversations, because they talked about how social media can really be a space to share maybe the day-to-day lives of a pet foster. So on platforms like TikTok, maybe an engaging and influencer who's well connected and well known within the animal welfare community, and having them foster and having them document their experience on those platforms as a foster. In addition to that, they really emphasize describing and sharing the why behind pet fostering. And so here we see the connection to, why is this important? What does this mean for that animal that you're helping, or the family who can't care for that animal in that moment? Really understanding the why, and how, as when you engage as a pet foster, you're helping. It's a ripple effect, right? You're helping so many different people and animals in the process. In addition to that, again, creating awareness and having individuals to share that messaging, but having those individuals really have a connection to the community. So they weren't necessarily interested in, having a face of the movement, but someone who they could really connect with, really resonate with, to carry this message about, the importance of pet fostering, opportunities of pet fostering, and just increasing that overall general awareness. And so with that, here are just a couple of final quotes from the focus group discussions. And again, these individuals were represented across the entire US, various different ages, various different culture and ethnic backgrounds. But the overall arching theme is that there are opportunities to engage these communities very specifically in the pet fostering process. And many of them have already been engaged and have already previously been fosters. But there is certainly a gap, and certainly a way to kind of fill that gap, as the respondents noted in some of their recommendations that they shared. So with that, that concludes kind of the overview of my research, and I will open the floor for any questions, comments, concerns, feedback that you have.
Thank you so much. That was really, really insightful. I know the wheels were turning on ideas of what my organization's doing internally, and it's really good to have this insight. Thank you for this. I also wanted to introduce Sharon Fletcher. She's the Maddie's Director of Marketing and Communications. So she's here as well to help with the Q&A. But I saw one question in the chat to get us started, and then I would love for anyone to unmute, or if Sharon has questions. Maria asked, and you might not know just off the top of your head, but just in case, what age group was considered Gen Z for the survey? Maria had asked that question.
Gen Z, off the top of my head, 18 to I think about 24, 25, and then millennials are 26 to 41.
Yeah, because the current Gen Zers start at 11, but we only had the 18-year-old and above take the survey. Do you want to stop sharing, and then we can see you? That'd be great.
Sounds great. Michelle also just put in the chat, do you require a foster agreement? I wonder if that's a question for somebody else in the chat. I'm just following it. But I don't know if that if you require a foster agreement. Michelle, are you on the call? Do you want to unmute? She might not be able to also.
Oh,
Okay.
I see Amy Charles said it surprised her about the Gen Zers having time. That surprised us too.
Yeah, Amy, I think our theory as we were kind of fleshing it out after the focus groups is that, you know, oftentimes college students, you know, they go to class and they go home a lot of the times, right? And yeah, they might be busy on the weekend and, you know, might be out here and there, but there is a lot of downtime for those college students. And one college student specifically comes to mind. He was a student at the University of Virginia. And he was like, yeah, like I would love to foster. I would love to have like a dog in the dorms and, you know, everyone kind of foster this animal, right? And so I think that, you know, we assume that these younger people are busy and, you know, they're ripping and running. But I also think that, you know, for those that are really passionate and love pets, that they would create the time and space for it.
And take the dog everywhere with them. If
right.
it was yeah.
Right.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Michelle Robinson with Cause for Pause Gary, and I have a question regarding the foster agreement. So when you go, we typically do a foster agreement for short-term or long-term. Do you do that? Or do you require it?
Are you talking about an organization that might do foster for someone in the community?
Yeah, so we do fostering as well in our community. So we do a foster agreement so that we have a written understanding or kind of a guideline communication of what fostering entails. Just so that it doesn't get snangly down the road. Do you do a foster agreement or no?
We're just presenting the research about it.
But Michelle, to that point, a lot of people mentioned how they think that there should be kind of some supplemental information provided in that pet fostering experience, right? So they said that anyone shouldn't just be allowed to foster, right? They should know and understand kind of what the expectations are, especially if the pet requires, you know, special needs or special services, et cetera. And so that was some of the feedback that we got from the respondents that, you know, it would be helpful to have that additional information, additional support, but that wasn't necessarily posed as a requirement that they felt should be in place.
And I thought what was interesting as well is the participants shared that they had no idea whether they had to pay for everything for the foster pet if it was through a shelter or not. And that to me sounds like a great opportunity to make sure that when you're sharing information about a foster program with your community, to let them know what's involved, what you cover. You know, if you have a sponsor that's covering supplies, or if, you know, the bed comes with it, or, I mean, if they're not familiar at all, just giving them kind of a good overview of what fostering is. And using the word foster was confusing because a lot of them, I know I see a couple people mentioning pet sitting. It is similar in a way to pet sitting for someone and they didn't quite understand that nuance. So I think being able to share from a communications perspective with your community, letting them know what that definition of foster, some people might just stay away because they don't even know what foster means. So if we're defining taking care of a pet for a particular period of time, or short period of time, we'll supply the pet food, the bowls, and the bed, whatever that might be. Kelly Dewar may have some other ideas on that as well, since she is our senior specialist in foster care. But things like that, that just, to me, it sounded like, wow, they just need information and not assume that everyone knows what that term means. It's very common to those of us in the field, but not necessarily to your community. And that's what we found out in the survey.
And I saw a couple additional questions in the chat. So one was, what is the recommended social media platform? And so we kept hearing, you know, Instagram and TikTok, especially as we talk about, you know, profiling like a day in the life of a pet foster. TikTok was absolutely the platform that they recommended, kind of those short form videos to give space for that. And also, Mary, I see your question about the survey discussing special needs. And so there was a portion in the survey that asked respondents whether or not that they believe that the pet fostering process was specifically for dogs that had special needs and whether or not that would be a barrier. And I can't remember offhand, but I don't remember the results being overwhelming in a way that it really kind of stood out as something noteworthy for finding. So I don't necessarily think that there was any correlation there of whether or not that impacted audiences or potential fosters, because again, these are pet lovers. They are, you know, connected with pets.
Yeah, I also think that they wanted to know more information.
They've probably had pets their entire lives, and so I didn't see that as very.
Yeah. Yeah, Kristen Morrow said about they have a Spanish speaking population that there is not one single word that describes pet foster. So yeah, being able to describe it in a couple different ways is really a great idea.
I see one question from Mary Ellen. It says, our intake has become out of balance between adoptable pets and those with special needs or behavioral issues. This balance has made it hard to bring in adoptable pets since the special needs end up staying in the shelter longer. Did your survey hit on special needs? Like an interest, I guess, in behavior or medical challenged, taking on those with fostering?
Yeah, that was what I was just saying, that we didn't necessarily find any that being a barrier.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
Yeah, it seemed that, you know, those animals with special needs or you know, those without. So we didn't see that as a barrier.
Okay, you covered that, as well as I think there was like a hint on, sorry, my internet's a little bit in and out, but the agreement piece being a barrier. Okay, great. Thank you. And thanks, Kim, for sharing the resources in the chat. I appreciate that. Perfect. Are there any other questions? I'm just looking through, and Shannon, you're probably looking through here as well. This is very, very helpful for sure. Are there any other, I guess just so I know, you covered a lot of the barriers that have come up. Were there any others that come to mind just from your conversations and in the research that, like, if we had a takeaway, something that, you know, in operations or in our fostering program, something that we should go back and look at? And it probably has already been covered, but something that seemed just really glaring to you in your research?
And I think it's probably something that won't come as a surprise to any of you, but just removing the assumption that you have to be this pet expert or have, you know, this lavish home, you know, with a fenced backyard and all of those things in order to be a pet foster, right? You know, all you have to do is provide the love and support that pet needs in that moment. And, you know, just removing that assumption that, you know, there have to be all of these stipulations in place in order to be a pet foster.
That's great. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, did you find that the social media aspect was pretty generational specific, or is it working across generations?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was those Gen Zer and millennials that, you know, rely on those sites for information. as compared to the baby boomers, silent generation. They relied on more traditional sources like, television. And when, their local news station has a segment covering, ways to pet foster. We did see a little crossover in terms of animal welfare organizations and the vets, right? Because everybody has to take their animal to the vet. And so that's a great opportunity to be able to access and inform all people across all generations, because again, everybody has to go to the vet. Everyone's going to, their local pet store. And so that's a great source of information there.
The baby boomers seem to cling to Facebook.
Yeah.
That was their first, beyond MySpace, that was their first inroad. But another part was getting out and talking to the community. They spent a lot of time talking about that and being authentic. The Gen Zers especially, don't put someone in the neighborhood or, talk about foster care if they aren't inclined to be a foster caregiver themselves. So authenticity was super important to that age group specifically. But being in the community and authentically being in the community, showing up, being there at community events, not just hearing about the impression I got was not just hearing about your organization because you want donations, but being part of the community and how you show up. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does. I think a lot about the note you made about attachment, the fear of getting too attached, but I also really liked the idea of foster testimonials too. So I wonder, do you think that could be helpful? Maybe doing more of those, like hearing the voices of fosters and their experience, because I hear that a lot just with friends and people that aren't in the animal welfare space, they don't want to get attached or say goodbye as being a big reason.
Absolutely. And we saw that in the survey data. It was those testimonials where people really kind of spoke to, their experiences and kind of their feelings and their attachment to the dog and the pet rather in the process, that really kind of shaped how they perceive the process. And so we certainly think that those authentic experiences that speak to those emotions and kind of tap into that core of who we all are, especially as pet lovers, could certainly have an impact there.
I see another potential revision of a question about how to get folks to help with older dogs. And I have a friend who specifically decides to take in older dogs for foster care. And I think the testimonials could come in specifically useful in that instance, to know that it's not a horrible experience and that it could be a really fulfilling experience to know that you're helping them live out the best and sometimes calmest years of their lives, and just making that more popular and turning it from a negative into a positive.
Absolutely.
This is great. There's thank you, Kim, for putting a lot of resources in the chat. This is very helpful. And I know Camp Maddie will go into depth into foster programs as well and answer a lot of these questions that are coming up, but this is very helpful. Thank you so much, Dr. Cox. I know we're right at the end of the session, but I wanted to direct everyone to Maddie's Pet Forum. We're going to put a recording of this incredible session up there later today, and Allison's putting that up, as well as if there's any other questions that come up. I know this is a lot of information, and so questions might pop up later as we're thinking through this presentation, but just sincere thank you to you, Dr. Cox. This is very, very insightful, and anything we can do to be more inclusive and accessible for bringing in fosters is just truly valuable. And thanks, Sharon, for also helping with answering questions and talk about this research. Appreciate it. So thank you all. Thanks, Allison. And thanks, Sharon, for also helping with answering questions and talk about this research. Appreciate it. Perfect. So thank you.